In 1943, behind the bolted doors of Calcutta's apartments, residents listened to a haunting sound, the desperate, continuous cry for rice from the streets below. Soon, those cries faded into silence. Over 3 million people starved to death in Bengal that year. Entire families were physically decimated, their bodies reduced to skeletons as they collapsed on the pavements of one of the British Empire's wealthiest cities. The British colonial government offered a simple explanation for the tragedy. They officially categorized the famine as an act of God, attributing the mass casualties to devastating droughts and unavoidable crop failures. But historical archives and modern climate science suggest a different cause. If the environment wasn't the primary driver of this disaster, we have to look closer at the human decisions behind the death toll. In 2019, researchers mapped out historical soil moisture and weather patterns across India to test the empire's official narrative. They analyzed exactly how much moisture the soil held during the 1943 harvest. This chart tracks rainfall during every major Indian famine for over a century. Every catastrophic event was preceded by severe drought, except for 1943. Rainfall in Bengal that year was actually above average. This lack of a drought points the investigation away from the clouds and toward the ground, specifically toward wartime panic, local speculators, and imperial policy. With the weather ruled out as the primary cause, the investigation must focus on the choices that governed the flow of grain through the region. The crisis began in 1942, when the Japanese military occupied neighboring Burma. This instantly cut off Bengal's primary source of cheap, imported rice. Fearing a Japanese invasion of India, the British administration enacted a denial policy. The objective was to leave no resources behind for an invading army. British forces systematically destroyed or confiscated thousands of these local transport boats and seized rice stocks in coastal areas. Prioritizing this scorched earth defense effectively crippled the transport and food networks that the poorest Bengalis relied on to survive. Nobel laureate Amartya Sen describes what followed as an entitlement failure. It's a condition where people starve because they lose the ability to buy food, even when it's physically available. To fund the war effort, the British administration rapidly increased the money supply. This triggered inflation that saw prices rise by 500%, making the wages of laborers practically worthless overnight. Merchants reacted to inflation by hoarding grain, waiting for higher prices. These massive mounds sat in plain view while people starved. The problem wasn't a lack of food, but that the people who needed it most couldn't buy it. In wartime Bengal, unchecked speculation and rapid inflation turned a basic necessity into a luxury that only the wealthy could afford. These economic levers were controlled from London by the War Cabinet, led by Prime Minister Winston Churchill. While Bengal suffered, Churchill's government exported 70,000 tons of rice out of India to build stockpiles for European troops who were already well supplied. The Indian viceroy sent urgent requests for 1 million tons of emergency wheat. London repeatedly rejected these pleas, claiming that ships like this one could not be diverted from other military needs. Documented remarks from this period reveal a callous disregard for the victims. Churchill blamed Indians for the famine, stating they were breeding like rabbits, and even mocked the survival of Mahatma Gandhi. Historians now describe this as faminogenic behavior, a situation where a government prioritizes military and strategic goals over civilian lives, despite knowing the lethal consequences. The colonial administration attempted to manage the optics of the disaster through strict wartime censorship. They seized and burned 5,000 copies of an investigative report titled Hungry Bengal. But artist Chittaprosad and photographer Sunil Jana traveled through the most affected districts to document the reality. They recorded the names and ration card details of the starving to create a record the empire couldn't ignore. Their work provided undeniable evidence of the crisis. When images of bodies abandoned on city streets reached the international press, the colonial administration was finally forced to acknowledge the catastrophe. The British state tried to remove these victims from history, but grassroots art and journalism ensured the world was forced to watch. The famine left a permanent scar on Bengal's economy. To survive, millions of peasants were forced to sell their land, creating a new, massive class of landless poor. The desperate struggle for food also broke the city's social trust, turning neighbors against each other as resources dwindled. Political parties used the tragedy to fuel communal tensions, exchanging blame for the hoarding and the lack of relief. These divisions helped lay the psychological groundwork for the violent 1947 partition of India. The 1943 famine stands as evidence of how administrative decisions and wartime policy can be as lethal to a population as any military campaign.